No bones, no verified DNA, no captured specimen. Science says Bigfoot doesn't exist. And yet, over 3,300 documented sightings cluster in 3 specific wilderness corridors across North America, many describing the same creature indigenous peoples named centuries before any camera existed. So what would it actually take to prove this thing is real? The answer begins long before the legend went mainstream. Long before the word Bigfoot appeared in headlines or documentaries, stories of a wild, elusive figure traveled by memory and firelight through the forests of North America. Among the Coast Salish people of the Pacific Northwest, the being is called Saskets, a name that carries the weight of centuries. In Salish tradition, Saskets is not a monster or a curiosity, but a guardian of the land, a presence to be respected and feared. Other nations speak of Tsonakwa, the wild woman of the woods, or Chiyetanka, the great elder brother who watches over the Lakota's ancestral grounds. Each name reflects a different relationship to the land, but all share the sense of a boundary between the known and the unknown, the human world and the deep forest. For many elders, these stories are not entertainment. They are lessons about humility, stewardship, and the dangers of arrogance. The wild man in the woods is a reminder that not everything can be seen or controlled. In some tales, he warns children away from dangerous places, and in others, he punishes those who disrespect the balance of nature. The figure is not always flesh and blood. Sometimes he is spirit, sometimes a shadow, sometimes a test of character. Across the continent, from the Nehalem's Yi-Ditai to the Colville's Skanakum, the wild man appears wherever the forest grows thick and the rules of ordinary life begin to blur. These traditions do not describe a cryptid waiting to be catalogued. They describe a living relationship with the land, encoded in language and ritual. The persistence of these stories across geography, language, and time offers a clue to why the mystery endures. The figure now called Bigfoot was never simply a creature to be discovered. He was a boundary marker, an embodiment of the unknown, and a warning that the world is deeper and stranger than it appears. Over 3,300 modern Bigfoot sightings are logged in the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization database, covering nearly every state and province in North America. The data forms 3 distinct corridors: the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachian Highlands, and the Rocky Mountain foothills. These clusters don't simply mirror population density. Instead, they align with remote, heavily forested regions, places where human presence thins and the landscape grows unpredictable. Heat maps built from these reports reveal persistent hotspots, not just random scatter. The majority of witnesses aren't passing motorists or casual tourists. Most describe themselves as hunters, hikers, loggers, people accustomed to the outdoors, often familiar with regional wildlife. Their stories share striking similarities: a tall, upright figure covered in dark hair, moving with a purposeful gait. Yet, the circumstances vary. In 2015, a retired park ranger in the Olympic Peninsula recounted a close encounter at dawn, describing the subject's height as nearly 7 feet and its stride as impossibly long. Thousands of miles away, a nurse driving a rural road in West Virginia reported a figure crossing the highway in 2 steps, vanishing into the tree line. Despite the sheer volume of reports, the scientific community points to the lack of physical evidence. No bones, no confirmed DNA, no specimen. Still, the consistency of these accounts, their concentration in ecological corridors, and the credibility of many witnesses present a puzzle that resists easy dismissal. As the body of testimony grows, so does the pressure to move beyond anecdote and toward something verifiable. In October 1967, a 16mm camera rolled at Bluff Creek, capturing a figure whose stride and posture would become the center of decades-long debate. The Patterson-Gimlin film, less than a minute in length, drew biomechanists to its frames. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, an expert in primate movement, measured a stride of about 1.2 meters, long for a human, yet not impossible. He points to limb proportions and the swinging arm motion as challenging to fake with a 1960s suit. Still, the lack of a mid-tarsal break and a subtle side-to-side sway leave room for doubt. Dr. Caroline Baker, a skeptical analyst, highlights missing heel strikes, ambiguous angles, and a gap in the film's chain of custody that clouds authenticity. Attempts to replicate the gait with athletes and prosthetics have come close, but none match the original's fluidity. Each analysis finds both human and non-human traits, but no clear answer. The film remains a high-quality anomaly, neither confirmed nor debunked, its subject still walking the blurred line between legend and evidence. Footprint casts have become the closest thing to physical evidence in the Bigfoot debate. Forensic podiatrists brought in to scrutinize these traces focus on two features: the so-called mid-tarsal break and the presence of dermal ridges. The best documented casts, like those from Bluff Creek in 1958, Elk Wallow in 1982, and the Skookum site in 2000, measure between 25 and 38 centimeters long and 10 to 13 centimeters wide, with stride lengths sometimes exceeding 2 meters. Some casts display a pronounced pressure ridge across the midfoot, a trait found in non-human primates but absent in modern humans. Others show loops and whorls resembling friction skin, with ridge spacing around 0.35 millimeters, wider and more irregular than human prints. Replication experiments complicate the picture. Under controlled conditions, a prosthetic foot with a flat arch pressed into moist loam can generate a mid-tarsal ridge and even mimic the ridge patterns if air bubbles are introduced during casting. Bear paw replicas also produce similar pressure ridges, especially on soft substrates. Early casts, like the hourglass-shaped double ball print, have been flagged for features consistent with hoaxing, artificial toe bulges, inconsistent depth, or embedded objects. The forensic podiatrist's verdict is measured. Some casts, such as those from Elk Wallow, retain anatomical details that resist easy dismissal, yet the possibility of artifact formation or deliberate fabrication remains high. Without biological material, hair, tissue, or DNA, footprints alone cannot resolve the mystery. Each cast is a puzzle piece, intriguing but incomplete, and the search for definitive proof moves forward. Inside the genetics lab, a molecular geneticist prepares a fresh set of gloves and opens a sterile kit. The process begins with a lesson in contamination control. Every environmental DNA sample, whether from hair, soil, or water, must be accompanied by negative controls and chain of custody documentation. In 2012, a much publicized mitochondrial DNA sequence was reported as a potential breakthrough. The sequence, initially labeled as unknown, was later traced to human contamination and primer bias during PCR amplification. No independent laboratory could replicate the result. The 2019 FBI analysis of a supposed Sasquatch hair sample found only deer DNA, confirming the risk of misattribution when protocols slip. Today's environmental DNA methods promise more sensitivity, but the reality remains stubborn. A 2024 environmental DNA survey sampling soil and water from high sighting zones in Northern California returned only the expected signatures, including bear, elk, and coyote. Not a single primate sequence surfaced. The geneticist demonstrates the steps: filter, extract, amplify, sequence, compare. Each stage is double-checked with blanks and replicates. Yet, after thousands of attempts, no verifiable biological sample has passed through this pipeline. Without a specimen or a reproducible DNA result, the genetic search for Bigfoot reaches a hard stop. The inquiry now turns to whether the ecological landscape could even support such a creature if it were real. A primate weighing 250 kilograms would need up to 400 kilograms of leafy plants each day to survive, a scale matched only by the largest herbivores. In the Pacific Northwest, where most reports cluster, even the densest forests offer limited edible biomass once winter sets in. An ecologist points to the resource bottleneck. Black bears, which top out at around 350 kilograms, supplement their diet with salmon and carrion, while a strictly plant-eating biped would face fierce competition for calories. No post-glacial hominin fossils have surfaced in North America. Neither bones nor teeth have been found, despite thousands of years of paleontological surveys. A primatologist adds that the absence of any skeletal remains, even from accidental deaths, stands in stark contrast to the fossil record of every other large mammal on the continent. Theories invoking bipedal bears or a surviving Gigantopithecus from Asia run into further trouble. Bears can rise and shuffle on two legs, but their stride is short and their gait sways side to side. Gigantopithecus fossils are confined to Asia, with no evidence of migration across Beringia. Without bones, DNA, or a plausible food supply, the case for a hidden North American primate faces mounting biological obstacles. A cognitive psychologist studies the patterns behind eyewitness claims, searching for the mental shortcuts that shape what people think they see. In controlled experiments, solo observers faced with ambiguous movement in the woods misidentify animals or shadows as something extraordinary nearly 3 out of 4 times. Memory is pliable, especially when primed by stories or fear. Group accounts show fewer errors, but even then, confidence often outpaces accuracy. Meanwhile, field technologists have filled the wilderness with surveillance. A single camera grid in the Cascades produced over 1.5 million images in 1 year. The images showed bears, elk, hikers, and storms, but not one verified primate. False triggers from wind or heat account for nearly all anomalies. Satellite imagery with its 30-centimeter resolution can pick out a moose in an open field, but under dense canopy, even a large animal vanishes into the pixel blur. AI models trained to spot the unusual tend to flag more false positives than genuine candidates. And without a confirmed Bigfoot image, algorithms have nothing to learn from but speculation. The result is a standoff. Minds are wired to find meaning in uncertainty, while machines drown in noise and blind spots. The mystery persists, not for lack of effort, but because both human perception and modern sensors reach their limits at the edge of the unknown. Science demands proof. Yet the anomaly persists. Over 3,000 new sightings have been logged since 2000. As technology sharpens our vision, the absence of conclusive evidence raises deeper questions about belief, perception, and the limits of knowledge. Sometimes, the real mystery is why we keep searching.